Good morning, sir. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, thank you very much.
May we please call Mr. Miller?
Of course.
I do solemnly,
I do solemnly,
sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Okay.
Could you confirm your full name, please, Mr. Miller?
David William Miller.
Mr. Miller, you have already given evidence in Phase 2 of the inquiry and attended the inquiry for that purpose in October 2022. Thank you for coming back to the inquiry to assist it in its work in Phases 5 and 6. As you know, I will be asking you questions on behalf of the inquiry. You should have a hard copy of the second witness statement provided by you to the inquiry in a bundle in front of you at the second tab. It is dated the 28th of February of this year. Do you have that?
I do.
If you could turn to page 16 of that, please. Do you have a copy with a visible signature?
I do.
Is that your signature?
It is.
I understand that you have a correction that you wish to make to this statement in light of recent disclosure. Would you like to tell us what that correction is?
Yes, in paragraph 51, I make a statement about the impact programme, and disclosure this week has reminded me that I was in fact on that board. So I was on the impact board.
With that correction made, are the contents of that statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
For the purposes of the transcript, the reference for Mr. Miller's second statement is WITN 034-70200, and for completeness, the reference for Mr. Miller's first statement, provided for Phase 2, which already appears on the inquiry's website, is WITN 034-70100. My questions today, Mr. Miller, will focus on the matters covered in your second statement relating to Phases 5 and 6, although I may refer back to your Phase 2 evidence where it is relevant to those Phases 5 and 6 issues. Starting, please, with the roles you have held with the Post Office. You helped with this when you gave evidence in Phase 2, but given that it was some time ago, I hope you'll forgive me for going over this ground again in brief. You joined the Post Office in 1970, is that right?
Correct.
You moved to Post Office Counters Limited in 1983.
Correct.
In 1995, you joined the Horizon Project.
Correct.
And that was as a deputy director at that stage. And you were appointed Horizon Programme Director in 1998, is that right?
Correct.
In Phase 2, it was your evidence that you had delivered a nationwide project for the Post Office a few years before, but that you did not have a technical background, is that right?
That is right.
You say in your second statement at paragraph 3 that you left the Horizon Programme Director role at the turn of the year 1999. By that, do you mean 1999 into 2000?
I do.
Your oral evidence in Phase 2 was that you left the role in early 2000, and it may be that a document we're going to look at later this morning will assist with the timings of that. You went from the Horizon Programme Director role into the role of Managing Director of Post Office Network, is that right?
That's correct.
A position you held until July 2001.
Correct.
Your responsibilities in this role included you having responsibility for the Operations Directorate and the Automation Directorate, is that right?
There were some others as well, but yes, those two certainly.
Is it right that Post Office security and investigations operations fell under the Operations Directorate?
Yes, at that stage for the 18 months they did, yes.
Is it right that the Horizon system, among other systems, fell under the Automation Directorate?
That's correct.
Who was it who reported to you on Post Office security and investigations operations when you were Managing Director of Post Office Network?
I think it was Alan Barry as Operations Director, but I'm not absolutely sure.
Who was it who reported to you on any issues relating to the Horizon system when you were Managing Director of Post Office Network?
David X. Smith, if I can put it like that.
The IT David Smith.
The IT David Smith.
And did you report to Stuart Sweetman in this role?
I did.
Is it right that you did not sit on the board as Managing Director of Post Office Network?
That's quite right.
Although you held the role for 18 months, you say in your statement that you were on sick leave for the last 6 months of that time.
That's true.
And at paragraph 10 of your second statement, you say that you returned to work in August 2001.
That's correct.
And at this point, is that when you became Operations Director of the newly reconstituted Post Office Limited?
That's correct.
In this role, you initially reported to the Managing Director of Post Office Limited, is that right?
I think I reported to Stuart Sweetman.
In the Operations Director role?
Yes. And then I think Stuart Sweetman left and Paul Rich took over temporarily as Managing Director of Post Office Limited before David Mills arrived.
And David Mills arrived as Chief Executive in early 2002, is that right?
That's correct.
After which point you reported to him?
I did.
You say in your statement that when you were Operations Director, you were responsible for the retail line, including subpostmaster relations and for cash distribution. Is that right?
That's correct.
But you also had a role helping David Mills to understand the business and assisting in recruiting new directors as required.
Yes.
As Operations Director, you sat on the board, the Post Office Limited board. Is that right?
That's correct.
So you were an executive member of the board from the point of taking up this role in 2001. Just to pin down the point at which you became a member of the board, you say in your second statement at paragraph 8 that you were a member of the board from November 2001. There appears to be a gap between you taking up the Operations Director role in August 2001 and that point. Is that right?
Yes, there is.
And why was that?
I'm not sure, but it may be to do with the precise setting off of the date of Post Office Limited when it was reconstituted.
You say in your second statement at paragraph 11 that as the scope of the changes needed became apparent, David Mills changed your job title to Chief Operating Officer. Are you referring here to changes needed to the business, to Post Office Limited? You say in that paragraph that you thought this happened in about 2004. I'd just like to look at some board minutes, please, from 2002, which was sent to you for the purposes of preparing your second statement, which might assist with dating this change in role to the Chief Operating Officer. Could we have on screen, please, POL 30-21479? these are the minutes of a meeting of the Post Office Limited Board on the 24th of May 2002. We can see David Mills in attendance as Chief Executive, and then 2 people down, we have your name and title, Operations Director, David Miller. So at this point, it appears that your title was still Operations Director. Would you agree?
Yes, indeed.
Could we have on screen, please, POL 30214880? These are the minutes of the Post Office Limited Board meeting, which took place later the same year on the 26th of September 2002. Looking about halfway down the page, we see your name next to apologies. A little further down, please. David Miller and your role described as Chief Operating Officer. It appears from this that you held the role of Chief Operating Officer by September 2002 rather than 2004.
Yes, I would. I would go with the minutes, obviously.
On the face of these minutes, there is no person listed as being Operations Director. Was someone else given the role of Operations Director when you became Chief Operating Officer, or was the role subsumed by the Chief Operating Officer?
The role was subsumed.
The board minutes the inquiry has seen suggest that by February 2005, Rick Francis had been appointed as Operations Director and was attending board meetings as well as you as Chief Operating Officer. Can you help with the circumstances of Rick Francis's appointment and the remit of his role?
Yes, Rick Francis was recruited to run IT, so he was IT Director. But as David Mills reviewed responsibilities, he felt it would be beneficial if Rick took on some of my operations responsibilities, particularly cash. And therefore, my role was changed a little bit in order to accommodate that.
You say in your second witness statement at paragraph 11 that the Chief Operating Officer role focused on some of the major changes needed to stay solvent. Is that for Post Office Limited to stay solvent?
Yes, that's true.
What was the financial position of Post Office Limited when you became Chief Operating Officer?
We were running at a loss, and we were trying to put ourselves in a position where we didn't run at a loss. The complicating factor was that to run the rural network needed a subsidy from government, and there was a lot of work on what size of the rural network ought to be and how much money we would therefore require from the government to run it.
What was your brief from David Mills as to the priority to be given to improving the financial position of Post Office Limited?
My first priority was to do a project which was called Network Reinvention, which was in fact closing originally 3,000, I think in the end it was 2,500 of the non-rural post offices. The government had supplied a sum of money, 150 million, voted through Parliament to compensate subpostmasters, and it was a question of working out where the people were who wanted to go, where we needed post offices, and trying to make a best match of the two.
You say that the Chief Operating Officer role focused on these major changes in relation to staying solvent. Were you briefed by Mr. Mills on any other priorities for you as Chief Operating Officer when you took up the role?
No, he focused very heavily on the need to get the company into a solvent position.
So that was the overriding priority at that time?
Yes, it was.
You say in your statement that you reported to David Mills until he left the organisation in late 2005, is that right?
That's correct.
And when he left, you became temporary managing director of Post Office Limited for a 2 to 3 month period until Alan Cook arrived as David Mills' replacement.
Yes, it was until Alan Cook arrived, whatever that period was.
You then reported to Alan Cook until you retired on the 28th of July 2006, is that
Correct.
right? Presumably reporting to Alan Cook as Chief Operating Officer once again.
Correct.
Before we come on to the detail of your involvement in the issues being explored in the current phases of the inquiry, I'd like to address, please, the question of your understanding of your duties as an executive director on the board. When you were appointed as a board member, were you provided with any induction or training covering the nature of your duties as an executive member of the board?
Yes, we did a day session with our solicitors, Slaughter and May, but that focused very heavily on the issues regarding company profit and loss and on our duties as board members if we felt the company was not going to be able to pay its creditors in the future.
What was your understanding of the board's accountability for the oversight of operational performance?
That we were responsible for that.
What did you understand your accountabilities to the Chief Executive Officer to be when you were Operations Director and then Chief Operating Officer?
I was responsible for the areas that I had been allocated for. I was responsible for whatever targets were agreed between me and the Chief Executive. And I was responsible for... no, I think that's it. Sorry.
Would you agree that the identification, analysis and management of risk is central to running a company?
I would.
Do you agree that it is a vital area of board oversight and of fundamental importance?
Yes.
Do you agree that identifying, analysing and managing risk was a fundamental part of your executive responsibilities?
Yes.
Would you accept that in order to discharge your responsibilities in relation to risk, both as an executive and a board member, you needed to be proactive and curious about possible risk areas?
Yes.
Where you identified a risk when carrying out your executive role, what were the mechanisms in place for you to raise that risk, first with the CEO and second with the board?
I've had one-to-ones with the CEO, and I would expect risks that I identified to be raised there. But that the board had a risk register, and there was a process by which actually anybody in the company, certainly board members, could put items on the risk register. These would then be assessed by finance, and then they would appear on a regular basis on the risk register as a risk defined and what mitigation action was required.
Do you consider that the culture at the Post Office was supportive of executives reporting concerns about risk to the CEO and the board?
Yes.
Why do you say that?
Just that it wasn't just the CEO, it was Sir Mike, who the inquiry has seen, set up a risk committee, and he was keen that we should be looking across the areas and identifying risk, as well as David Mills. So it wasn't just at CEO level, it was at chairman level as well.
Ms. Price, there's still a document on my screen. Can that come down?
Apologies, sir. That can come down. Thank you. When you were in directorship roles, was your remuneration fixed or performance-based?
Largely fixed, but there was a performance element in it.
How was your performance measured?
There would be targets agreed at the beginning of a financial year, and then those targets would be reviewed with the chief executive at one-to-ones throughout the year, and at the end of the year, conclusions would be made as to whether targets have been met or not.
Targets for what?
Costs of running the business, some targets for feedback from staff on what they felt about the business. I'm sorry, time is not helping me here, but there are a number, is all I will say. Oh, I'm sorry, things like quality of service in terms of, particularly at direct office counters, was an issue that was fairly big.
Did you receive bonus payments whilst you were in any of your director roles?
I did.
How was the level of bonus payment determined?
That was done, I think there was a remuneration committee, but that seemed to be taken, decisions on that seemed to be taken outside the main board.
I'd like to turn, please, to the knowledge of the Horizon system issues in the run-up to legacy Horizon rollout, gained from your time as Horizon Programme Director, which you brought to your subsequent roles. I don't intend to go back over your Phase 2 evidence in any detail, but I would like to draw together some key points, which I will take one at a time. If at any point you want to look at the transcript of your oral evidence, we can bring that up on the screen to assist you. Just say if you'd like me to do that. First, you told the chair you were aware of issues with the cash accounts in March 1999, arising from the end-to-end testing which had been done. In particular, there had been incorrect cash account mapping, which would have caused misbalancing cash accounts in all offices had the system been in operation. This resulted in an entry on a known problem register, and your position in Phase 2 was that this was an issue which was being dealt with. Is that a fair summary of your evidence on the March 1999 end-to-end testing report?
That is.
Second, after the live trial of the Horizon system in May 1999, you were made aware that subpostmasters were having serious problems with the software, especially the balance. And this was explained to you at an NFSP meeting attended by you on the 11th of June 1999, and at a meeting at around the same time, attended by a large number of subpostmasters in the Northeast. Again, is that a fair summary of your evidence on your awareness of issues being experienced by subpostmasters
Yes.
trialling the system? Third, you were asked about the minutes of a board meeting which had taken place in July 1999 and which you attended. The minutes recorded an assessment attributed to you that the Horizon system was robust and fit for purpose. You were asked about this by both counsel to the inquiry and by Mr. Maloney on behalf of the clients he represents. Is it fair to summarise your evidence on this point in this way? You would not have told the board that the Horizon system was robust and fit for purpose, because at that time, it was not either of those things.
That I would not have done it.
Your evidence, and we can go to your responses to both counsel to the inquiry and to Mr. Maloney, but your evidence was that it was not correct that Horizon was robust and fit for purpose.
No, that I remember that exchange with Mr. Maloney,
Yes.
and I should not have said that it was robust.
What is your position then on whether you did say that?
I can't remember the board meeting, but I make the assumption that the board minutes are correct. So I did say it.
Sorry, Mr. Miller, I want to be clear about this. You don't actually remember what you said. You are prepared to assume that the board minutes are correct. And if they were correct, you should not have said what is recorded. Is that it?
I'm afraid so, sir, yes.
Fine, thank you.
Fourth, in August 1999, there were ongoing concerns about transactions being completely and accurately recorded, in particular those raised by acceptance incident 376, which had not been resolved by the time you left the Horizon Programme Director role. Is that a fair summary on that point?
Yes.
There are just two documents I would like to go to from the final months before you left the Horizon Programme Director role, given their importance. Could we have on screen, please, POL 30090839? Going to the second page of that document, please. This is a letter to you dated the 23rd of August, 1999 from Ernst & Young. And scrolling down a little, please. You see here, Dear Mr. Miller, Horizon Acceptance Testing. As auditors of the Post Office, we have been asked by Post Office Counters Limited to provide you with our views in respect of certain accounting integrity issues arising from tests performed by POCL on Horizon data in the live trial. We have not performed any validation of the issues or testing of the data. Our views expressed in this letter are based on information provided to us by Post Office Counters Limited, resulting from their tests. This letter is not intended to provide any assurance over any data in the live trial or over any results arising from tests of such data. The live trial is limited to 323 outlets. And the next paragraph, the following issue, as described to us by Post Office Counters Limited, gives us concern as to the ability of Post Office Counters Limited to produce statutory accounts to a suitable degree of integrity. We understand that Post Office Counters Limited has attributed a severity rating of high to this matter. There's then reference to Incident 376, that's acceptance incidents 376, and a reference to data integrity. And the last sentence there, at present, this control test is showing discrepancies in that certain transactions do not record the full set of attributes, and this results in the whole transaction being lost from the daily polling. We are also informed, the paragraph below, that an incident has also occurred where transactional data committed at the counter has been lost by the pathway system during the creation of the outlet cash account and has not therefore been passed to TIP in the weekly cash account subfiles. Both types of incident result in a lack of integrity on each of the two data streams used by Post Office Counters Limited to populate its central accounting systems. We understand that the cash account data stream is the primary feed for Post Office Counters Limited main ledgers and client reconciliation processes. Just going over the page, please. We see the second paragraph there. It is fundamental to any accounting system that it provides a complete and accurate record of all transactions. These discrepancies suggest that the ICL pathway system is currently not supporting this fundamental. On the first page of this letter, please, going back to that first page and scrolling up, there are some handwritten annotations from someone with the initials DWN. Is that you?
That is.
And you say this: please ensure that these issues are fully addressed during the remaining acceptance process. Keep me in touch. And 1 and 2, 2 appears to be Keith Baines. And can you help with who the first recipient of your comments is?
That's right.
Who is the first recipient there?
Bruce McNiven, I'm sorry, and he was a deputy director of the programme.
You accepted in phase 2 that this assessment by Ernst & Young and the potential implications for the company accounts was very serious indeed.
Yes, could I just say, though, that we, Stuart Sweetman and I, Stuart Sweetman was my boss and on the board of Post Office at the time. He was the sponsor of the project. We discussed what our relationship ought to be with the auditors, when we ought to start informing auditors about what we were doing. And this was part of the process to get Ernst & Young, who are our auditors, on side and understanding what we were doing. So when they came to audit things, they would have had forewarning.
One of the last documents that you were taken to by counsel to the inquiry during his questioning in phase 2 was a document termed the third supplemental agreement, a document which you said at the time you remembered. Could we have that on screen, please? The reference is FUJ 00118186. And the date of this document is the 19th of January 2000, which is after, I think you say you left the Horizon Programme Director role. But if we go to the last page, please, that's page 36. We can see that the agreement was signed by you on behalf of Post Office Counters Limited, witnessed by Keith Baines. Can you help with what role you were in when you signed the document?
Yes, I was still Horizon Programme Director, and I was running that concurrently with setting up a new business unit as the Managing Director of Post Office Network.
How long were you running those two roles concurrently?
Until David Smith was appointed as the Automation Director.
That can come down, thank you. You accepted when giving your phase 2 evidence that this agreement acknowledged that it was not always possible to get to the root cause of an imbalance or to make the appropriate correction. Do you recall that?
I don't, but I will accept it.
Could we have on screen, please, Mr. Miller's second statement again? The reference is WITN 034700200, and it's the second page of that, please. You deal at paragraph 4 here with your view of things at the point you left as Horizon Programme Director. And you say at paragraph 4, at this stage, my view of Horizon was that it was a new, very large and complex system, which was under constant review and improvement by Fujitsu. I never considered legacy Horizon perfect, but thought that any problems with the system were subject to control procedures leading to resolution. And then going, please, to paragraph 7, over the page, please. After stepping down as Horizon Programme Director, I did not brief anyone from the POL or RMG boards, investigation teams, legal teams, or any other person responsible for the conduct of prosecutions or civil proceedings, because 1, I thought that any problems with the system were subject to control procedures leading to resolution, and 2, I was unaware of the full extent of the Horizon issues until I read the judgments I have referred to, and those are the judgments you referred to on the previous page of Hamilton and others in the Post Office. Can you help, please, with what you mean by control procedures leading to resolution?
That there was a process in place of reporting errors or problems that had helplines on both the Post Office side and particularly on Fujitsu, and that they were processing as time went on. As things arose, they would be put into the system, processed, resolved. So that was my view of what was going to happen.
So you're not saying here that when you left the programme, you thought there was a complete fix in the pipeline to eradicate cash account inaccuracies. You were saying that you understood that when these occurred going forwards, there would be procedures in place to resolve them. Is that right?
Yes.
What was the basis for this understanding?
Well, the basis was understanding what helplines had been set up and what the procedures were.
When you say at paragraph 20 of your second statement that you believed that issues were being addressed going forwards, is this another reference to your understanding there would be control procedures in place?
It is, yes.
That document can come down now, thank you. In phase 2, the inquiry heard evidence from Tony Oppenheim, the Finance and Commercial Director of ICL Pathway, to the effect that the third supplemental agreement and the subsequent operational processes acknowledged that there would be occasional mismatches given the scale of the system. His assumption was that the Post Office would look at these and certainly at the outset give postmasters the benefit of the doubt. He said that ICL Pathway needed feedback when these things occurred in order to find errors in the system and to fix them. Were you aware that ICL Pathway's understanding was that where mismatches arose, Post Office would look into these and certainly at the outset give postmasters the benefit of the doubt?
No.
Could we have on screen, please, FUJ 3098040? This is a PowerPoint presentation produced by David Smith, that is IT David Smith, It provides a history of Horizon and Horizon Online. The date on its face is September 2010, some years after you retired, so you would not have seen this at the time. There are two parts of it, however, that refer to your involvement in Horizon issues, so I'd like to take you to those. Starting, please, with page 21 of this document. This slide deals with Post Office Counters Limited's views on the agreement reached with ICL Pathway. And it reads, the leaders at POCL felt they had been shafted by a government pathway stitch-up, whilst the group board signed up to the deal, brackets Sunday afternoon in the CEO's kitchen. Next point, they did so with a gun pointed at their head, sign this or all other things you want you can forget. POCL felt stuffed by Pathway with terms that were imposed. Dave Miller, the MD of Post Office Network, said at the time, I had the same feelings about Pathway as I would have for the man who had just shoved 15 inches of bayonet up my posterior. No statement could more adequately express the attitude of Post Office towards Pathway. Do you recall making the comment, which is in quote marks there?
Absolutely not.
Are you saying that you didn't make that
I
comment?
didn't make that comment.
Does the sense of feeling described in relation to the Post Office's feelings towards Pathway accord with your recollection?
All the circumstances around the departure of the benefits agency and the deal that the government felt it had to do, and the pressure that was put on the Post Office were partly known to people at my level. But I think we felt as a company that we needed to carry on with the project and we needed to work with Pathway, ICL, Fujitsu. And the sort of negativity about it, I think there was a certain amount of resentment, perhaps understandably, but I mean, those words, a lot of that is entirely unprofessional. What we were trying to do was to make the thing work, to get it rolled out, to get Horizon in for the whole company, including subpostmasters, ironically.
Moving, please, to page 32 of this document. This slide covers the pilot and the rollout. Then over the page, please, we have this. In parallel, Dave Miller, PONMD, and Mike Stairs, who headed up Pathway at this time, resolved to improve the relationship. And there are a number of things listed there. Series of workshops with a facilitator to better build relationships between the parties. The success of the rollout and the development of CSR Plus helped create more trust between the parties. However, the relationship was still crusty. Post Office wanted its pound of flesh. Do you make Pathway hit SLAs for which there was no business impact if they were missed, but which gave Pole the right to terminate if they were not met within a given time frame? Just looking at the content of this slide, does this reflect you having some continuing involvement in the Horizon programme when you were managing director of Post Office Network?
Yes, in the sense that I wanted us to work with Pathway in a constructive way to get things done. And so that would be true. But this document that I have been shown before, it had no official position with regard to anything that was done by Post Office Network. This was written by somebody in 2010. So there are some elements of truth in this document, but there's an awful lot of writing it up for the purpose of, if you like, the ego of the person who wrote the document.
Could we have on screen, please, WITN 059700123? This is a document authored by Jeremy Folkes and is dated February 2000. Its title is BA/Post Office Counters Limited and Horizon, a reflection on the past 5 years, lessons, issues and key points. Going to page 2, please. The introduction explains the purpose of the document. During the last 5 years of the various incarnations of the BA, POCL and Horizon programmes, there has been a considerable turnover of staff within the POCL team, leading at times to a lack of continuity and certainly a loss of key knowledge and accumulated wisdom. This document in the next paragraph is intended to help mitigate the effect of the loss of a further batch of staff. It evolved from the concept of producing a general brain dump document, in addition to more usual formal handover for work in progress and the like. This document has been produced for Dave Miller, the Managing Director of Post Office Network Unit, the business unit which owns Horizon on behalf of the Post Office. Do you recall receiving this document at the time it was produced for you?
I recall asking him to do it.
Section C of this document covers future risk areas. Going to page 21, please. Section C6 is titled Some Technical Capability Still to be Proven. And the introduction to this section says this. This section outlines a number of technical areas which it would be wise to watch, although they are not the subject of any outstanding acceptance incidents. They should not be taken as predictions of things which are yet to go wrong, more as a list of possible areas of weakness which could trip us up in the future, especially as the number of offices increases as the planned rollout rate up to the target full population. There is an argument based on the same principles as used to justify, albeit not to great effect, the need for assurance during development, that states the need for ongoing assurance during the live operation of the service and associated system. We do not appear to have any contractual basis to seek such involvement. However, we may wish to negotiate with Pathway at the relevant time to seek some confidence that these issues are indeed under control. Then a number of issues are raised. At C2, there is the effect of slow replication. The last paragraph on this page reading as follows. However, as a result of the proper handling of slow replication, i.e. the effect should be benign, these delays, these scenarios can go unnoticed and therefore unfixed if there is some underlying problem for a period of time. Other issues flagged, going over the page please, were communication failures, integrity during failure conditions, scalability, performance over time, and system management. Can you help with what you did with this document and any steps which were taken based on the content of it?
As far as I'm aware, I would have given it to David Smith, who is Director of Automation. What I would have done, like to have done, would have been to organise a meeting in the company with Jeremy. Jeremy was about to leave, by the way, which is why I asked. And I thought he had all these years' experience and we ought to understand. Unfortunately, the changes that were taking place meant that, as far as I'm aware, that meeting didn't happen. So this was, if you like, put into our company archive. I suspect that some of the good stuff that is in here was not picked up.
Could we have on screen, please, Mr. Miller's second statement, paragraph 5, please, which is page 2. You say here, I did not have any involvement with oversight of such issues. This follows on from your discussion of issues with Legacy Horizon when you were Horizon Programme Director. You say, I did not have any involvement with oversight of such issues after I stepped down as Programme Director. Just thinking of the documents we've just been to, does this remain your evidence, notwithstanding the work you asked Jeremy Folkes to do and the slide contents that we looked at? Or do you consider that work different in character?
The two things that you have just quoted to me, I would consider that were different in character. I would have liked to have taken a lot more notice of what Jeremy said, and I had that, as it were, on hand early on. The other thing that you showed me, I have not become aware of until relatively recently. And that was done in 2010. So I've distinguished between the two.
Turning then, please, that can come down, thank you. Turning then, please, to criminal investigations and prosecutions. When did you first become aware that the Post Office criminally investigated and prosecuted postmasters for criminal offences arising from alleged shortfalls in branch accounts?
I became aware of what the Post Office did in terms of prosecutions in 1970 when I joined the company. And we had a session with the security part of the company, the Post Office Investigation Division, for management trainees. And they made it very clear that that was something the company did. They were talking primarily then, because I was in Royal Mail, about Royal Mail, but they did say that this applied to sub-postmasters.
After the rollout of Horizon, the branch accounts were generated by the Horizon system. That's right, isn't it?
Yes.
And apparent shortfalls were identified on the basis of a mismatch between, for example, what the Horizon printout said should be in the till and what was actually in the till.
Yes.
Would you agree with that? So does it follow that once you were involved in the Horizon rollout, you were aware that prosecutions were being pursued using data generated by the Horizon IT system?
I wish it had been as crystal clear to me as that, but I think I have to say that I would have been aware, yes.
Who did you understand was carrying out investigations which led to those prosecutions?
Post Office investigators.
Who did you think was responsible for the decision of whether to prosecute? Some of this is what I have learnt through my attention to this inquiry, but there was a mix between our lawyers and the Post Office Investigation Division in terms of who would decide about prosecutions. Did you know that at the time, that it was a mix between the lawyers and the investigations?
Well, I think when I say a mix, I think this varied over time. From what I've heard, I think this varied over time. with sometimes the lawyers being in charge, sometimes the investigators being in charge, and I probably wasn't as aware of that position at the point in time you are talking about.
What did you understand the role of Royal Mail Group's criminal law team to be in relation to prosecutions?
They were, as far as I was concerned, they were the criminal law team of the company. Post Office Limited did not have a lawyers. It used group lawyers, and they were the people who actually made the decisions, gave the advice, and so on.
At the time, to what extent did you consider the position of the Post Office to be unusual, being simultaneously the alleged victim, the investigator, and the prosecutor?
At the time, I accepted it as part of what the company did. Subsequently, I can understand how that is a potential conflict.
At the time that you were part of the executive team and a member of the board, did you recognise that there were risks inherent in that position?
Not sufficiently.
Do you accept now that these were foreseeable risks? Taking one example, that the interests of the business, in particular financial interests of the business, might improperly influence the conduct of investigations and prosecutions.
I can see now, looking back, that that could well be the case.
Why do you think it was you didn't see that at the time?
I think, and you know, this is hard. I think, having come through a system where the investigation division and the legal division had always acted in an autonomous way, I think it was very difficult to see through that at the time.
Knowing what you did about the potential for incomplete or inaccurate transactions to be recorded by the Horizon system, setting aside the control procedures which you understood would be in place, there was a further particular risk, wasn't there, that unreliable data might be used in support of prosecutions. Would you accept that?
I would accept now, with what I know, yes.
Did you recognise that at the time?
I didn't.
Do you think that is a risk that you should have recognised at the time?
Looking back from here, yes.
Was this a risk that the board as a whole identified at any point before you retired?
Not as far as I'm aware.
You refer twice in your statement to your working relationship with Tony Marsh, who was the Post Office Limited Head of Security, at paragraph 14 and at paragraph 55. Could we have paragraph 14 of Mr. Miller's second statement on screen, please? It is page 5. Looking, please, at the last sentence in paragraph 14, or the last two sentences. I have no memory of a POL RMG problem management team. I think that refers to the part above. Apologies. POL RMG security worked to group, although they were described as embedded in POL. I met Tony Marsh regularly for approximately an hour, and he had access to me at any time. And then going please to page 13 of the statement to paragraph 55. You refer to a document there, and we'll come on to that. Tony Marsh worked for the Group Security Director with a dotted line to me. He was designated Head of Security in Pole. I met him regularly, and he had access to me at any time if I was available. I had a good working relationship with him, and I trusted him. The document you refer to here are the minutes from the Post Office Limited Board meeting on the 20th of August 2003. The regular meetings you had with Tony Marsh, the ones you refer to in those paragraphs we've just looked at, did these start when you took up the role of Operations Director in 2001, or was it later?
I honestly can't remember. But there is still some confusion in my mind, because Tony Utting, who was who is familiar to this inquiry, he had a line of reporting in the finance function. So he worked, according to his testimony, through to Rod Ismay, who worked for Peter Corbett. During the time when Tony and I worked together, he actually worked for the Group Security Director with what was known as a dotted line to me. So it was a confused situation looking back on it.
It was Tony Marsh's evidence to the inquiry that at least at one point he reported to you. Would you accept that that is correct? That de facto...
I'm sorry, I do not recall that.
Could we look, please?
Except, sorry, if I may, just when I was Managing Director of Post Office Network, he was in a line working to somebody who worked to me.
The August 2003 board minutes that you refer to at paragraph 55, and perhaps if we can have those up on screen, that's POL 30(21483). Looking at page 8, please. Scrolling down, please. We see here an item delivering security standards in the agency branch network, strategic choices. And under this, Tony Marsh presented the security paper to the board on behalf of David Miller. Can you help us with why he was presenting the security paper to the board on your behalf, if it wasn't that he was reporting up to the board through you?
I can't, I'm sorry.
Ms. Price, am I right in thinking that Mr. Miller was present himself?
Yes, sir. If we can go to the first page of that document.
So does that jog your memory, Mr. Miller? For some reason, Mr. Marsh is making a presentation on your behalf.
It doesn't, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Setting aside the strict reporting lines, the activities that were conducted under the remit of Post Office Head of Security would have fallen under operations, would they not?
Yes.
And those activities included criminal investigations and to the extent that the security team had involvement in prosecutions, their involvement in prosecutions brought by the Post Office. Was this...
Can I just question that?
Of course.
Because Tony Utting's evidence, and he was head of investigations, was that, as I said, he worked through the finance line.
Well, it may be that we can't bottom that out through your evidence, and the chair has the evidence from Mr. Utting and others who were involved in prosecutions over the years. But taking a step back, the activities under Tony Marsh, which certainly included criminal investigations, we've already agreed that those fell under operations. So was that why you had regular meetings with Tony Marsh? Because the activities conducted under him fell under operations and you were chief operating
broad
officer.
area of Tony's remit, which was pretty wide, including terrorism and so on, we would discuss on a regular basis.
Can you help with, I think you weren't sure when your meetings with Tony Marsh started, but did they continue until your retirement, accepting?
Yes, they did.
Accepting the period you were temporary managing director?
Yes.
And how regular were your meetings with Tony Marsh?
I either monthly or 3 monthly.
And those meetings lasted around an hour?
Yes.
How soon after you started meeting with Tony Marsh did you first discuss Post Office criminal investigations and prosecutions? Can you recall?
I can't recall.
Do you remember discussing those activities with him?
I don't remember discussing any detail of those with him.
Did you discuss with him your knowledge of the history of Legacy Horizon, including the issues relating to inaccurate cash accounts, which were still being addressed when you left the programme director role?
I don't recall doing that.
You don't recall doing so, or you didn't?
I don't recall doing so.
Do you consider that that would have been relevant information for Tony Marsh to have had, given his role in relation to investigations and prosecutions?
On reflection, and I have reflected on this very hard, when I finished being the Horizon Programme Director, I think it would have been very beneficial if I had notified both the lawyers and the ID that Horizon was a new system coming in and that they should be very cautious in looking at evidence coming out of that system. I didn't do that, and I regret not doing it.
It was Tony Marsh's evidence to the inquiry in July of last year that no one ever suggested to him that there were system faults and that investigators like him had absorbed a very strong belief from the business that the Horizon system was robust. Where do you think he and his investigators gained this very strong belief from?
I think there was, it depends on what time frame you're talking about.
If we cover just the time frame between you starting as operations director until your retirement.
Yes. I was unaware of ever putting out any messages that Horizon was infallible. So I'm in the early days, I'm not clear where those messages were coming from.
notwithstanding the close working relationship you had with Tony Marsh, do you maintain, as you say at paragraph 15 of your statement, that you were not involved in the oversight of investigations or prosecutions?
I do, and I go back to the evidence about Tony Atting and where he worked for, and he was head of investigations.
When David Mills took up the role of Chief Executive Officer in April 2002, and you were Operations Director, you had a role helping him to understand the business. Did you share with him any information about the history of Legacy Horizon?
We discussed Horizon, how it had come about, particularly the impact that the programme had the departure of the benefits agency. So he got the history in that sense.
Did you raise with him any of the issues there had been relating to inaccurate cash accounts ahead of rollout?
No, I don't think we discussed that level of detail.
Did you raise with him any of the problems that subpostmasters had been experiencing in the live trial that had been raised with you?
I can't remember. I don't think I did.
You covered in your phase 2 evidence another acceptance incident relating to training. Did you raise any training issues that had arisen?
Yes, we had discussed that, and I think he picked that up in talking to subpostmasters when he was out in the field anyway, and probably took some action on that.
Did you not consider at the time the history relating to inaccurate cash accounts to be relevant information for Mr. Mills coming into the business?
Not at the time.
Do you recognise that to be important information he should have had now?
I think it would have helped. It's a question of the weight that I put on that information. I would put greater weight on it now than perhaps I did then.
And why is it that you would put greater weight on it now than you did then?
Because of everything that we've learned over the past 2 or 3 years.
Could we have on screen, please, POL 3021482? These are the minutes of a Post Office Limited board meeting which took place on the 19th of June 2003. You were present in your role as Chief Operating Officer. Going to page 2, please. Under Chairman's Business, there is a heading B, Horizon, and the minutes record this. The Chairman expressed a particular interest in furthering his understanding of the capabilities and limitations of the Horizon system. Meetings would be arranged with the appropriate managers to provide the Chairman with a detailed overview. The person listed to action this was Alan Barry. What role was he holding at the time?
He was the IT director.
And this was a relatively new chair of the board, wasn't it, Sir Michael Hodgkinson?
It was.
And he was expressing an interest in the capabilities and limitations of the Horizon system. Did you offer any information on the history of the introduction of Legacy Horizon at this meeting?
Not at this meeting, no.
Did you attend the meetings which were due to be arranged by Alan Barry?
No, I didn't. I wasn't invited.
Did you feed into the agendas for those meetings or suggest that the chair be told about the history of Legacy Horizon?
I don't recall doing that, no.
Can you recall who was involved in those meetings?
I can't, I'm sorry. It was under, Alan Barry was at the same level director as I was, and he was dealing with that issue.
Did you provide any other input on or information about the known problems in the history of Horizon's development to the board, either at this stage or before?
Not that I'm aware of.
Was it not relevant information for the chair and the board to know that there had been weaknesses and faults identified in the process of getting Horizon to roll out?
Yes, that was known within the IT directorate.
So I've reached the end of one topic. Might that be an appropriate moment for the morning break?
Yes, of course. Yeah. So what time shall we recommence?
25 to, sir.
Certainly.
Thank you. Hello, sir. Can you see and hear us still?
Yes, I can.
Mr. Miller, I'd like to turn, please, to reports you received when you held director roles of sub-postmasters experiencing problems with Horizon, including unexplained shortfalls and attributing shortfalls to the Horizon system. Starting, please, with POL 93084. This is a case summary prepared by a post office retail line manager about a sub-postmaster in Ramsgate who was experiencing balancing problems. There was a shortage of almost £77,000 revealed following an audit on the 13th of June 2003. The sub-postmaster had refused to accept responsibility for the loss and had complained that he had not been given the chance to interrogate the Horizon system to prove that the loss was caused by the system. If we could go to page 6 of this document, please. The penultimate paragraph on this page. So at paragraph 7, just above that paragraph, we can see some explanation by the retail line manager of a process that had been adhered to. And then underneath those points, further to this, the paperwork has been reviewed by Rhea McQueen and then by Dave Miller, Chief Operating Officer, Pol, following a flag case complaint from Mr. Andrews' constituency MP, and all was found to be in order. Indeed, Mr. Miller emailed a response to this effect to Mr. Andrews on the 10th of July 2004, in which he stated, "The agreed processes have been followed in this case, and I can find no evidence to support your allegations of unfairness." Do you have any recollection of this case now?
I have read and reread this since I got it last week. And I cannot recall this case. Sorry, genuinely, I can't recall. And I know I'm referred to in here as being part of this.
How regularly were you involved in responding to complaints, whether addressed directly to you or reaching you via an MP?
Not a lot, because there would be some sort of flag case office where those would be dealt with. I don't know why I was involved in this particularly. Yeah, I'm really sorry, but I just don't know.
Does it follow that you can't help with whether you had any concerns about the nature of this complaint at the time?
Well, I have to say, having read it, I have serious concerns, because I think somewhere in here there's the line perhaps I've seen too often, which is that the sub-postmaster couldn't prove that the system was wrong. And I think that's featured here, and that's unfortunate.
Do you think that you had concerns at the time? I know you can't remember this particular case, but if you'd seen it at the time, would you have had the same concerns you have now?
No.
Why not?
Because there was clearly bubbling up within the business that there were issues with regard to Horizon. The extent to which those were being properly surfaced was really quite small. I mean, it says I have reviewed this. I have reviewed the particular thing that says he couldn't prove that Horizon was wrong, and accepted that. And, that is clearly an error.
Before you go any further, the expression "a flag case complaint" in that paragraph that Ms. Price took you to, it may be my fault, but I don't think I recall that precise phraseology previously. Can you explain what a...
Yeah, normally, sir, it's from an MP or somebody, but normally an MP, and there is a process for dealing with those. There would be a person whose responsibility it was within the business to deal with those, to deal with the process, to make sure the paperwork was done. It would get priority.
So in other words, a complaint which is taken pretty seriously?
Yes.
Or should be?
Yes.
Right. Sorry, Ms. Price.
Not at all, sir. Could we have on screen, please, NFSP 50298? This larger document contains a series of correspondence involving a sub-postmaster at the Cranlarrick branch at the NFSP and you. The sub-postmaster's letter appears on page 8 of this document. Could we go to that, please? This letter, scrolling down a little, please. Scrolling back up again, please. This letter is dated the 24th of August 2004, and it raises issues accessing online services on Horizon due to failure in the ISDN line. It also raises some unhelpful responses which were received after contact with the Horizon Help Desk and the Network Business Support Centre. The issue was raised with David Mills by the NFSP, and you responded on his behalf on the 15th of September 2004. That's on page 4, please. And we can see here, thank you for your letter of 2nd of September addressed to David Mills. Overall, Horizon Systems availability is good. There are nevertheless issues which we have under active review, and I will update you on these as we make progress. Our online systems continue to perform within expected parameters, and these parameters have been set in line with industry standards. For example, the service availability that we have planned and deliver for banking and e-top-ups is in line with that provided by the banks and other retail outlets. Understandably, there is a perception that the problems are on the increase. This is because over time, the number of branches that have experienced a problem has, as you would expect, increased. And as the volume of online business has increased, the impact of failures has increased. I repeat that overall system availability is very high and within the parameters to which the system was built. When a system goes down in a branch, a process of investigation is initiated in order to identify where the problem has occurred. The problem could be with the equipment within the branch, within the telecommunications network, within Horizon, or within a number of back-end systems provided by banks, mobile phone operators, and our debit card service provider. Once the point of failure is identified, the appropriate supplier can investigate the problem and, having diagnosed it, provide an appropriate fix. It is not possible when an incident occurs to give precise information about time to fix ahead of understanding where the problem lies. Of course, in some instances, the source of the problem is obvious and it's possible quite quickly to indicate time to fix, but in other instances, diagnosis can be protracted. Going back to the first paragraph, can you help with what the issues which were under active review were at this time?
I think the issues, this is, as I recall, about the ISDN lines, which were the basis of the network at that time. And there was variable performance. If people were at the outer reaches of the ISDN network or in a particular difficult location, problems could occur and fixing those problems could take longer than it ought to. And subpostmasters rightly got very fed up when they couldn't connect, they couldn't do online business, and there was a queue out the door of people who were customers who were very unhappy. So I think that would be my view of what primarily this was about. Certainly it was strongly represented by the NFSB at the time.
You will recall from the document which Jeremy Folkes authored in February 2000, the section relating to unproven technology when it came to integrity during failure conditions. Did you recognise at the time any risk that there might be an impact of system failures on SPMs in terms of the integrity of accounts data when these issues were raised?
I don't think that was front of my mind at all.
Would you have expected a root cause analysis to have been done by Fujitsu in these circumstances?
I think that would have been very helpful.
As far as you're aware, was there any investigation, whether by the Post Office or Fujitsu, as to any impact on the integrity of the data, the accounts data?
I'm not aware.
Did the issues raised in this correspondence, or indeed in the report we've just looked at from the retail line manager, have any impact on your view of what data would need to be obtained from Fujitsu, from Post Office's internal IT teams, or anyone else to support actions against subpostmasters?
No.
That can come down, thank you. Turning, please, to the civil proceedings brought by the Post Office against Julie Wolstenholme and the settlement of those proceedings. You deal with this at paragraphs 57 to 61 of your second statement. Is it right that this case first came to your attention when Ms. Wolstenholme was challenging her employment status in 2001?
That's correct.
But at that stage, you say you were not made aware that Ms. Wolstenholme was challenging the Horizon system. Is that right?
That is right. Just what she was doing would be considered by me and others to be a threat to the whole. If she was wanting to change the subpostmaster's contract and challenge that, that would be a significant challenge to the business model. So that would have been, when I say that, I mean that it would have changed the economics of how we ran the business if she had won her case.
Could we have, please, page 14 of Mr. Miller's second statement on screen? Paragraph 59. That's page 14. You say, my first formal involvement with the case was that I was asked to sign off the compensation payment to Miss Wolstenholme in 2004 in the absence of Peter Corbett, who was on holiday. Rod Ismay's note to Donna Parker, my PA at the time, secured a slot in my diary for Tony Marsh. Rod Ismay's note, to which you refer here, is at POL 001 42503. Could we have that on screen, please? This is the email from Rod Ismay dated the 26th of July 2004. What role did Rod Ismay hold at this time?
I think he was head of some part of accounting. He was a direct report to Peter Corbett. So he's one step below the board.
And the Donna Parker here, that's your PA, is that right?
That was my PA, yeah. She was my PA, I'm sorry.
Presumably she would have forwarded on to you the email she received, along with any attachment. Is that right?
Yes, I think she would.
We can see the email was also sent to Mandy Talbot, Tony Marsh and Carol King. Do you remember Mandy Talbot?
I am aware of Mandy Talbot from this inquiry, not previously.
Does it follow that you did not have much contact with Mandy Talbot?
I didn't, no.
And Carol King?
Sorry.
Before we come on to the detail of this email, I'd like to look at one further document, please. Could we have on screen, please, POL 001 58493? This is an email dated 19th of May 2004 from Keith Baines to David Mills, the Chief Executive Officer, copied to Claire Wardle, Carol King, and Ian O'Driscoll. Can you recall Claire Wardle or Ian O'Driscoll at all?
I don't recall Claire Wardle. I recall Ian O'Driscoll's name, but that's about as far as it goes.
The title of the email is Action from Your Visit to the IT Commercial Team Meeting. And the email reads as follows. David, you asked who in Post Office was instructing the lawyers in the case referred to in the following risk on the IT register. Damage to reputation of Post Office and potential future financial losses if PO loses court case relating to reliability of Horizon accounting data at Cleveley's branch office. The instructions have been provided by Carol King in transaction processing. The case was being handled by Jim Cruz in legal services. Jim has now left Royal Mail and the work is outsourced to Waitman's Visit, who handle such cases for us in the North West. The case is scheduled for the week commencing the 16th of August. We have offered settlement and paid money into court based on what the subpostmistress would have received for 3 months' notice. Regards, Keith. It would appear from this email that the case with Miss Wolstenholme had been recorded on the IT risk register. To the extent that you can assist, which risk register was this? A Post Office Limited risk register or a Royal Mail Group risk register?
I don't know, but I would think, given the people involved here, it was a Post Office IT department risk register.
Were you aware that the case was on the IT risk register when you became involved?
No.
Did you have access to the IT risk register?
No.
How was the board kept updated about what was on the IT risk register?
The IT risk register should have fed upwards to the board risk register as felt appropriate by the IT director.
To your knowledge, did that happen?
I don't know, I'm sorry. I certainly had not seen this posed in this way as a risk.
This email predates the email from Rod Ismay to your PA. Do you recall David Mills discussing this case with you once he had noticed it was on the IT risk register?
I don't.
But it would appear that this was a case of which the Post Office Limited Chief Executive was aware.
It does appear to be, yes.
This was quite significant, was it not? The entry onto the risk register of a case which had the potential to damage the reputation of the Post Office because it related to the reliability of Horizon accounting data at the branch.
Yes.
This is something that the board should have been made aware of, wasn't it?
Yes.
It appears that the instructions were being given to the lawyers on behalf of the Post Office by Carol King in transaction processing. You don't recall Carol King, but does that fit with your understanding of who would give instructions in a debt recovery case, in essence?
I think that's probably right, but I can't say definitively.
Going back, please, to Rod Ismay's email, POL 001 42503. The email to your PA reads as follows. Donna, as discussed, here is the correspondence re the legal case. The first arrow below contains a note from Group Legal Today, brackets, Mandy Talbot is acting on this case. This is counsel's opinion. The other arrow sections below contain some more background from Carol King in Chesterfield Debt Recovery Team. In summary, we suspended Mrs. Wolstenholme in 2001 after apparent discrepancies in her cash accounts. We claimed for the value of these losses, and she counterclaimed for loss of earnings. Within her claim was an expert's opinion, which was unfavourable concerning Horizon and Fujitsu. We have lodged £25,000 in court, but Mrs. W has no legal representation and is pursuing the full amount of her claim, £188,000. It goes to court next month. Mandy, Peter Corbett is on holiday now. I'm therefore escalating this to Dave Miller. Presumably he was doing that by sending this email to your PA, is that right?
Can I just make a point?
Yes.
Peter Corbett and I are on the same level. We were both directors of Post Office Limited. So in my mind, escalation would have been to the level above, but it wasn't. And at the time, I should have asked that question.
So you think it should have been escalated to the level above?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, yes.
Why didn't you escalate it to the layer above?
Because I was dealing with it at speed, and I signed it off.
In this email, the part to Mandy then goes on, do you have a copy of the IT expert's opinion? Then there's a question for Tony Marsh. Tony, please, can you advise who in your team is leading in this case? Carol, thanks for your correspondence this afternoon. And then at the bottom, all, please do not circulate this any further than is necessary to support Dave and Group Legal with this case. Would you have read this email when you received it?
No, because it would have gone to Donna. But I have subsequently read it and noted that bottom line.
I asked earlier whether Donna would have forwarded the email and any attachment to you when she received it, and you thought that that was probably right.
I did.
If she did forward it to you, would you have read it?
Yes.
The summary given in the top of the email was that the case arose out of apparent cash account discrepancies, and that within her claim was an expert's opinion which was unfavourable concerning Horizon and Fujitsu. And your attention was being directed through your PA to two things. First, counsel's opinion on the case, which was attached, we can see, to the email. And second, the background to the case from Carol King in the email chain below. Starting, please, with the background to the case. This, in fact, appears to have been sent by Jim Cruz. If we can scroll down to page 3, in his email dated the 17th of March 2004. The background is quite lengthy, but it contains this in relation to the expert's report. Going over the page, please, to page 4, the third paragraph on this page. Poll then agreed to offer her up to £5,000 to settle. This sum was paid into court in July 2003, but has not been accepted. Since then, the report of the computer expert Best Practice PLC, based on the available call logs, has been received, and as you are aware, is unfavourable and unflattering to Fujitsu, if not actually hostile. In light of the report, which cannot really be challenged, I do not think that Poll will be able to prove, even on the balance of probabilities, that the losses were the fault of the SPM, and our agents are still concerned about the lack of evidence for the losses. They want to obtain counsel's opinion on liability and quantum, and the question of mediation has now been raised at the recent CMC. The next paragraph says this: at court, Mrs. W said that she would settle for 2.5 times her annual remuneration, a total figure in the region of £187,500, as this is the figure being paid to subpostmasters when offices are closed. Poll clearly cannot settle on the basis of such a sum, but the question of further questions to the expert has been raised, and I can only see further costs being run up in this case, with very little chance of Poll getting its money, even if it proves the case. I intend, therefore, to advise that Poll should pay Mrs. W or pay into a court the figure of 3 months' remuneration plus interest, on the basis that although it is unlikely that Poll can now prove the losses were her fault alone, as per the contract for services, Poll can give 3 months' notice without giving reasons, and this is all she will be able to obtain by way of damages in any event if she takes the matter to trial. The payment in should be of another £20,000 to take account of interest since November 2000. If it is not accepted, the case will have to be fought to resist the counterclaim, which cannot be accepted, but costs should be cut by accepting the expert's report and not seeking to challenge it further, and effectively not pursuing the losses and paying her full remuneration for the 3-month notice period, on the basis that this is all she will obtain by way of damages after a full trial. This was part of the email chain to which you were referred in the top email via your PA. Would you have read this at the time?
I can't remember, but I can't, sorry. I cannot remember.
Okay. Do you remember having concerns at the time that there was a computer expert report which was unfavourable and unflattering to Fujitsu?
There was conflicting information about this report. I have read it thoroughly in the papers that you have given me, and the descriptions from various angles that were given to me of it seemed to me to be unfair.
In what way do you consider
that Mr. Coyne actually did, within the information available to him, a good job, and that didn't suit various parties, including Fujitsu, and I think the inquiry has heard about that from Mr. Jan Holmes previously, but certainly it wasn't given sufficient weight.
Going back to the last line of Rod Ismay's email, there's no need to turn it up, but Rod Ismay was asking recipients not to circulate this any further than necessary to support you and Group Legal with the case. Can you help with why he would have asked recipients not to do that?
No.
Coming then to counsel's advice, could we have paragraph 60 of Mr. Miller's second statement up on screen, please? That is page 14. In the first sentence of this, you say, as far as I recall, I was not given a copy of the expert report or counsel's advice, nor did I request it. I definitely did not read it at the relevant time. We've seen from the email we've just looked at that counsel's advice was attached to the email sent to your PA. Does it remain your position that you didn't open it and read it at the time?
It does, I'm afraid, yes.
Why would you not have read it, given the summary of the case given to you and the background set out in the email chain?
Because the way this was channeled through to me was such that it came from a very senior finance officer and the head of security. And I have drawn this case to your attention because I should have said, stop, let's review this properly and let's understand what this actually says. But I didn't, and I signed off the sum of money, and it was paid. We had agreed to pay this lady, and we then paid her. That was kind of my view. But there were other views in this, as we can see from the paperwork, that people wanted to keep it quiet.
Looking, please, to counsel's advice. If we can have that on screen, please. It's POL 00118229. Going first, please, to page 18, towards the bottom of the page. we can see this is dated towards the bottom, please, the 26th of July 2004, and it's been provided by a barrister from 9 St John Street. Going straight to the key paragraphs, starting please with paragraph 10 on page 3. Counsel says this: Mrs. Wolstenholme has defended the proceedings, claiming that the computer system installed by the Post Office was defective, and this was in fact the cause of the losses recorded within her accounts. Further, Mrs. Wolstenholme puts the Post Office to strict proof of the losses it claims. Finally, Mrs. Wolstenholme counterclaims for damages in respect of wrongful termination of her contract, breach of her human rights, a claim under the Commercial Agents Direct Regulations, a claim for breach of the implied term to provide a computer system fit for purpose. And at 11, the trial of this matter is now about 1 month away. A joint computer experts report has been obtained. This report concludes from the limited records available that the computer system installed by the Post Office did appear defective. There is a very limited amount of documentation available in respect of the detail of calls made by Mrs. Wolstenholme and problems with her computer at the relevant time, as well as in relation to the errors and losses which built up in her Post Office records. This is because these records were destroyed after, about 18 months after the events occurred. Going down, please. Recognising the weakness of its position, the Post Office has made a payment into court of £25,000. And at 13, I am asked to advise in relation to quantum and evidence. I am asked to take into a particular account that the Post Office is anxious for the negative computer experts report to be given as little publicity as possible. Pausing there, can you help at all with where the message that the Post Office was anxious for the negative computer experts report to be given as little publicity as possible came from?
No, I can't. Well, sorry, just to say it didn't come from me.
Does this reflect a sensitivity, even at this relatively early stage in 2004, about the integrity of the Horizon system?
And particularly any publicity being given to that, yes.
Going then to paragraph 17, page 5, please. In view of the negative experts' report in this case regarding the computer system in place, Mrs. Wolstenholme's suggestion that the errors that arose were the result of defects in the computer system must be taken seriously. It is sufficient to place genuine and significant doubt on the evidence relied upon by the Post Office. In my opinion, to dispel that doubt and to persuade a court that its claim was justified, the Post Office would need to be able to produce to the court sufficient original evidence in support of its claim. It is unable to do so. I therefore conclude that the Post Office's claim against Mrs. Wolstenholme in respect of losses on her account would be likely to fail. This opinion is extremely significant, isn't it? That because of the negative experts' report, Mrs. Wolstenholme's suggestion that the errors that arose were as the result of defects in the computer system must be taken seriously.
Yes.
Had you read this at the time, what would you have done?
Well, I'd have had to say, hang on a minute, can we just understand exactly what is going on here? So I'd have had to have a meeting of senior people to review everything that was down here. There was a lot of knocking of the computer experts' opinion at the time by both Fujitsu and Post Office. And subsequently I've read what Justice Fraser had to say about it, and that was entirely wrong. Justice Fraser said he was right. And if you read the report, which I've done now, It's believable.
Could we have back on screen, please, paragraph 59 of Mr. Miller's second statement? That's page 14. Starting at the second sentence, you refer to the email securing a slot in your diary for Tony Marsh. Can you recall how long after Roddy's Ismay's email you met with Tony Marsh to discuss this?
I can't, but I remember that I learnt about it on the day.
You learnt about it on the day of the email, you mean?
No, on the day that Tony came to see me.
I see. So how did you become aware?
Donna said, Tony Marsh needs to see you urgently. Or words to that effect, I'm sorry, I can't remember. But I do remember, the whole thing I remember about this is that it kind of just happened. It wasn't there's a process here to review something. It was, need to get this done, and Tony Marsh wants to get into your diary. It won't be for long. And I have to say I went along with that.
Did you read anything before you met Tony Marsh?
I can't remember what I read. I'm sorry, I can't.
You say we met for approximately 10 to 15 minutes. To the best of my memory, he told me there was an issue with the expert advice, which had led our counsel to say that the case was unlikely to succeed. It was clear that he did not think much of the expert. The view was that we should cut our losses and pay up. He said something about Horizon. I cannot recall specifically what he said, but I remember checking with him whether there were issues with Horizon. I said something like, "You are not saying there are issues with Horizon, are you, Tony?" He said that there were no issues, and I got the impression it was a one-off case. During the meeting, he produced some paperwork to authorise payment, which I signed. So your recollection is that you signed off the authorisation of settlement at the meeting, is that right?
Yes, it is.
And you did so without having read counsel's advice or requesting the expert's opinion?
I did.
Why didn't you ask to see the expert advice when Tony Marsh discussed it with you in the meeting? This came to me, as I say, as a on-the-day issue. It came from a very senior finance person and from the head of security, who I trusted. And I regret, obviously, very much not having said, stop, let's review what's actually going on here. But I didn't. It may be that you can't assist at this remove, but what exactly did Tony say about the issues with Horizon or lack thereof?
I can't. I mean, for this distance, I can remember quite a lot about this because clearly I must have been uneasy, but I can't remember the really detailed conversation. In fact, this was so quickly done that I doubt if there was a lot of detailed discussion.
You do say, Mr. Miller, that you asked him, in effect, a direct question, whether there were issues with Horizon, and then you say what you might have said in the brackets that follow, and you appear to be saying that he confirmed to you that there were no issues with Horizon. Yeah? So I'm a little bit mystified how that could sit with the terms of the email which Mr. Ismay had sent. Because the whole case was about whether there was an issue with Horizon.
Yeah, I'm sorry, sir, I'm not going to be able to help you.
Well, one interpretation, and I'm simply putting forward possibilities, not expressing conclusions. One interpretation is that knowing that you hadn't read the relevant documents yourselves, in effect, Mr. Marsh misled you. Does that sit with your understanding of Mr. Marsh?
The way I'm looking back now and seeing how this was done does not sit with my opinion or previous opinion of Mr. Marsh, which is that I trusted him implicitly.
The other alternative, which perhaps does sit with what you're trying to articulate, is that despite Mr. Coyne being a jointly instructed expert approved by the court, there were those in Fujitsu and the post office who just weren't prepared to accept his opinion, and therefore decided that what they do was to get rid of this case for as cheaply as they could, and then pretended it never happened. Is that more likely?
I think there was clearly a desire within the business to get rid of this case.
Yeah. Whereas in fact, if responsible people within the business had treated Mr. Coyne's opinion seriously and carried out some investigations of their own, it might have prevented many of the things which followed. Is that fair?
I'm afraid that is correct, sir.
Yeah, all right.
Just following on from the Chair's question then, at paragraph 61 of your second statement, you acknowledge that by not reading counsel's advice and the expert opinion, there was a missed opportunity.
I do.
Can you recall at all the level of settlement which you approved?
I couldn't, but I think it was about £180,000.
But do you have an independent recollection of that now?
No.
We've seen reference to a number of figures in the paperwork, so that's why I asked, just to be clear. Can you recall at all?
If I'd been asked, I would have said it was under 150. But you know, I've now seen quite a few numbers.
Did you draw this case to the attention of the Post Office Limited Board at any point?
No. Could I just say
Apologies,
why?
go on, of course.
Because this was in Peter Corbett's line of command, and the only reason he hadn't been dealing with it was that he was on holiday. And I would have expected Peter to discuss this at board level.
even based on the limited information that you say you had access to at the time, do you think you should have referred it to the attention of the board, notwithstanding Peter Corbett's area of responsibility?
I probably should. But before that, I should have put a stop to it by saying, you know, this has got to be reviewed properly.
Could we have on screen, please, POL 30095506? This is a Post Office Limited board status report relating to actions from the Post Office Limited board meeting on the 13th of October 2004. Looking please to page 4. There is an action for you, 21 civil orders. Just before we look at the detail of that, what was the purpose of these board status reports?
To keep people up to date with where we were and to remind people that they had actions and that needed to be fulfilled by the next board or whenever, sorry.
And looking at the action under civil orders, the action is where fraud has been perpetrated against the company, ensure that the appropriate civil orders were being used immediately in advance of any criminal proceedings. And the status is recorded on the right-hand side of the page. I have received a report about the way we apply civil orders as of now, and I'm concerned that we are not properly exploiting the 2002 Proceeds of Crime Act. I have asked, therefore, for a speedy update of our procedures to do just that. It appears from this document and the board meeting minutes to which this action relates that you were leading on this item. Is that right?
Certainly I was asked by the board to see what was happening in this area.
Was this were these your words, I have received a report? Is this an entry by you?
I can't remember, but it's there, isn't it?
Can you recall at all what the basis for the conclusion that Post Office Limited should be properly exploiting the 2002 Act?
I'm afraid I can't.
Was? Could we have on screen, please, POL 30021486? These are the December 2004 poll board meeting minutes. You are present in the list and going to page 2, please. We can see the issue of civil orders here. Action David Miller under F. And the minutes say this: in the event of fraud against the company, David Miller would ensure that the pensions of fraudsters were targeted to help ensure the company was reimbursed. Was this a proposal that you made to the board, this particular reference to the to targeting the pensions of fraudsters, or was this something that was proposed by someone else?
It was something that was proposed by somebody else. I mean, I don't recall this in any detail at all, but I certainly didn't propose that.
What was your view on that?
Well, seeing it here, it sounds horrendous. Sorry, it sounds severe in terms of its intention.
At the time, did you associate fraud and the commission of it with shortfall cases involving sub-postmasters?
I don't know. Sorry.
This was less than 6 months after you signed off on the Wolstenholme settlement, and you had earlier in that year, or in the course of 2004, been made aware of other sub-postmasters raising issues about the Horizon system. Did it occur to you at any time that this might be relevant to decisions about recovery in fraud cases?
I didn't make the direct connection, no.
Could we have on screen, please, paragraph 16 of Mr. Miller's second statement? That's page 5. You say here, I was aware that Post Office Limited would, from time to time, pursue postmasters for the recovery of alleged shortfalls, branch accounts, including through civil proceedings. But again, I did not know any of the detail and was not involved in the oversight of such action. Does the knowledge of your involvement in the actions relating to civil orders in fraud cases at board level change your evidence at all in terms of your involvement of
Well, I don't think I
oversight?
could be so absolute in saying I did not know any of the detail.
Could we have on screen, please, POL 001 07426? And page 3 of this document, please. This is an email from Mandy Talbot to a number of recipients, including David X. Smith, that is IT Director David Smith. It is dated the 23rd of November 2005. It relates to a civil claim which had been brought by the Post Office against Lee Castleton for £27,000, which had led to a counterclaim limited to £250,000, given the summary in this email. First of all, were you aware of the Castleton case at the time that you were in director roles?
I'm sorry, I'm having to think because clearly I've read and seen an awful lot about it. I do not recall it in any detail at the time. I may have heard the name, but the details of the case I don't think I was involved in.
The first paragraph of the email reads as follows: proceedings have been issued against Lee Castleton, the former postmaster at Marine Drive, for £27,000. It was known by the business prior to issue that Lee Castleton blamed Horizon for the losses. External solicitors were asked to check with the Fujitsu liaison team and to assure themselves that the evidence in respect for Horizon was sound before the issue of proceedings. There had been no security investigation, so the data had not been requested from Fujitsu. Then 2 paragraphs down, as part of the claim, the solicitors for Lee Castleton have stated in the allocation questionnaire that they intend to call evidence from other existing and former postmasters about the problems with the Horizon system. They have also asked for disclosure of data about all calls or complaints logged from postmasters about the Horizon system, presumably from the inception of the system. they have called for disclosure of all documents removed from the branch office during the investigation. There is an issue over locating all these documents. This email also covers Mr. Bajaj's case towards the bottom of the page, and it explains that he was of Torquay branch office, postmaster who is challenging the validity of data supplied by the Horizon system on which errors have been raised against his branch office. He has not been able to explain the losses and has been required to make good the losses by way of deduction from remuneration. No proceedings have been issued, but the matter is in the hands of external solicitors. He has taken the step of writing an article in the subpostmaster November 2005 edition seeking, over another page, that's blank, please, information from other postmasters in a similar situation. His solicitors say that they have been contacted by other postmasters and that a class action is possible unless the deductions from remuneration are refunded. They also make a reference to what we assume is the Castleton case. Under that, there are some issues which are set out. In each case, the postmasters are challenging the validity of data provided by the Horizon system. If the challenge is not met, the ability of POL to rely on Horizon for data will be compromised and the future prosperity of the network compromised. Fujitsu's reputation will be affected. And there are a number of suggestions set out beneath that, which I don't intend to take you to in detail. You were not a recipient of this email, but David Smith was. This email and the suggestions underneath appear to have led to a meeting about Horizon integrity in December 2005. Could we have on screen, please, POL 00119895? These are the minutes from that meeting, which took place on the 6th of December 2005. We can see Keith Baines was present, along with Mandy Talbot and Graham Ward, among others. And the first point under findings is this: there is no generally understood process for identifying emerging cases in which the integrity of accounting information produced by Horizon may become an issue. Then under recommendations, page 3, please. Recommendation number 1 is that a coordination role should be established to maintain a list of all current civil cases and potential civil cases where accuracy of Horizon accounting information may be an issue, and ensure that all relevant business functions are made aware of these cases. Under specific action points, that's page 5, please. This is the 6th of those specific actions. KB, Keith Baines, to brief Dave Smith on the meeting's recommendations. Were you aware of this meeting to discuss Horizon integrity in December 2005?
No.
Did anyone report the findings and recommendations to the board, as far as you are aware?
Not as far as I was aware.
Did David Smith, that is IT Director David Smith, ever raise this with you?
No, but at this time David Smith was not IT Director. He was in the IT department working to Rick Francis.
Did Rick Francis ever raise
No.
this meeting or what was discussed at it with you?
No. I had, in my department, there was one representative, which was John Legg, who worked for Mike Granville, who worked for me, and nothing came up that line about this.
Going, please, to January 2006 and your involvement in the development of Horizon Online. You address this, that can come down now, thank you. You address this at paragraph 64 of your second statement. Could we have that on screen, please? It's page 15. You discuss in this paragraph some discussions that you were involved in, although that first document you say was sent when you were on sick leave. And then you go on at the bottom.
That was, sorry, just if I can make a point about the dates. That was March 2001, and there was an understanding that the Horizon system would stop in 2005, and we had to do some serious thinking and planning about what we were going to do beyond that. So I had discussed that with David Smith and others. I was on sick leave at the time that went in, but I would have been aware of what was in that document.
You, at the bottom of that page, say, my involvement in the development of Horizon Online was in 2006, when acting MD for a couple of months in between David Mills and Alan Kirk. I also signed off the document and the references there, which was prepared for me by Rick Francis, the IT director, and his team who were developing Horizon Online. Could we have the document you signed off on screen, please? It is RMG 6041. Going to the bottom of page 2, please. We can see your name and January 2006 as the date. Going back to page 1, please. Under background, there is this. It is essential that Post Office Limited achieves significant reductions in IT costs if it is to return the business to sustainable profitability. The major opportunity to do this resides with the Horizon system that is provided by Fujitsu Services under a contract that runs through to March 2010. Fujitsu Services proposed a major investment in application, branch and data center hardware, which would simplify the solution, enabling significant reductions in recurring operating costs on the basis that the term of the existing contract was extended to March 2015. However, this proposition gave a gentle upward increase in operating costs once the benefits of the upfront investment had been realised. Post Office Limited concluded that if it was to achieve a contract that delivered year-on-year cost reductions, then it would need to contract on a radically different basis. Post Office Limited has negotiated the basis of a deal with Fujitsu that closely mirrors what it believes would be achievable by going to open market. Then under options, on page 2, please. There are a number of options which include do nothing and wait to complete the contract at the end of the current term. None of these options generate the savings required within the necessary timescale. Termination of the existing contract at a cost of circa £80 million would enable disaggregation of the services in order to procure from best of breed. Can you help with what is meant by best of breed?
Just best available to the market.
I.e. alternatives to Fujitsu, yes. Potentially. Okay. This might deliver lower steady state costs. However, this would be at considerably increased risk and take longer to deliver. Then we have the Gartner Group of benchmark proposals from Fujitsu, which has enabled Post Office Limited to form a view of what it might expect to achieve by going to the market. Post Office Limited firmly believe that the speculative additional savings that might be achieved through open competition do not justify the increased risk. Then under risk, there's acknowledgement here that there are risks around time, cost and quality with any major IT investment. Post Office Limited and Fujitsu Services have now delivered 10 major releases of software to time, cost and quality. Cost reduction will require investment, and doing this through the existing relationship presents the least risk route. Additionally, a series of caps and collars are in place that limits Post Office Limited's exposure to cost overruns. The risk that Post Office would achieve greater savings through open competition is mitigated through Post Office Limited right to market test unbundled components of the contract. This market testing could enable the Post Office to complete all of the existing contract over a period of time. And the recommendation at the board, the current position, all the major principal areas necessary for a deal have been agreed with Fujitsu, and these have been endorsed at chief executive level. Detailed terms will be in place by March. The intention was to go to the February Post Office Limited Board and the March Royal Mail Holdings Board to seek formal approval for a new contract and associated investments. The recommendation is for the board to note the progress. At the time that you signed off this paper, were you aware of any review or audit conducted by the Post Office or any independent contractor of the effectiveness and reliability of Legacy Horizon?
No.
This was relevant, wasn't it, to whether further investment in the Fujitsu platform would be a good business decision for the Post Office?
Yes, except that the aim, I think, of this was to move on beyond legacy, seeking improvements on many fronts.
There is a focus in this paper on the saving costs in Horizon. How were you satisfied that Fujitsu could be made to produce the same or similar service more cheaply?
I wasn't at that stage. I mean, I think work had been done by Rick Francis particularly, and there are comparisons by a company called Gartner who compare IT systems systematically. So a lot of work had been done in that area.
Given the reports to you of problems experienced by subpostmasters with Horizon that we've been through this morning, as well as your experience of problems with the rollout of Legacy Horizon, did you have any concerns about the proposal to stay with Fujitsu?
I think it was discussed, not at length, but discussed briefly. I think the view was that going elsewhere could cause significant dislocation problems. And I think Rick and his team looked pretty closely at what we could and couldn't do, and the view was we needed to put Fujitsu under pressure, I think, to come forward with a better deal based on improved technology.
That can come down now, thank you. Could we have on screen, please, POL 30/81928? Going to page 6, please. Scrolling down a little. This is an email from Anne Chambers dated the 23rd of February 2006. The subject is Calendar Square. And the second paragraph of this email, I should clarify, this is to Mike Stewart. You're not on this email
No, this is
chain.
Fujitsu, isn't it?
Yes. But it's just a question as to whether or not you were aware of something in this email. The second paragraph says, haven't looked at the recent evidence, but I know in the past this site had hit this riposte lock problem 2 or 3 times within a few weeks. This problem has been around for years and affects a number of sites most weeks. And finally, Isha say they have done something about it. I am interested in whether they really have fixed it, which is why I left the call open to remind me to check over the whole estate once S90 is live. Call me cynical, but I do not just accept a third party's word that they have fixed something. Had you ever heard of any issues at the Calendar Square branch?
No. Going
to page 5 of this document, please. the email from Gary Blackburn, dated the 1st of March. This is to Sean Turner at the Post Office. Sean, it appears that Calendar Square is not alone with its mismatch problem. It also appears that Fujitsu are expecting S90 release to resolve this quirk. We have opened a cross-domain problem report. It appears from these emails that release S90 was expected to resolve the Calendar Square problem. Would you agree with that?
That's what it says.
Could we have on screen, please, POL 3032210? These are the Post Office Board minutes from the 20th of April 2006. Can we go to page 10, please? And apologies, before we go to page 10, just going back to page 1, please. We can see that you were present at that meeting. Going to page 10, please. We can see there is an operations report about halfway down the page. And that covers the Horizon S90 release. And it said at B4 that this would provide for a plethora of change requests across a variety of existing capabilities. What do you understand that to be saying? Did that mean anything to you at the time?
Well, that it was sweeping up a number of issues that should be sorted out by that release.
Did you have any awareness that the S90 release was intended to fix the Calendar Square problem?
No.
That can come down, thank you. I'd like to turn, please, briefly to the relationship between the reliability of Horizon and the accuracy of the company accounts. The Horizon system recorded transactions for the business, and the accounts for the business were compiled based on the transactions recorded by the Horizon system. We've seen already the Ernst & Young letter to you way back in August of 1999. Would you agree that the board had to satisfy itself that the Horizon data could be relied upon? Otherwise, it couldn't be satisfied that the accounts were correct.
It had to satisfy itself that all data. But I suspect there
that
was
the
some,
Horizon data produced.
yeah, including Horizon. But I suspect, in terms of the accounts, there was some materiality here.
Could we have on screen, please, POL 001 78249? This is described as the March 2004 Post Office Limited Horizon Electronic Cash Account Review. And scrolling down a little, please, it's from Ernst & Young, the external auditors, and it's sent for information to David Mills, Peter Corbett, you, Vicky Noble, Sue Harding, Alan Barry, Sue Lothar, Rod Ismay and Derek Foster. And just going to page 2, please, the second paragraph. There is a background here set out on an annual basis to support Ernst & Young in their review of Post Office Limited's financial statements, IA and RM. Can you help with who that is?
I can't, I'm afraid.
Undertake a review of the Horizon System electronic cash account and the system interfaces to CBDB. The purpose of the review is to provide assurance on the effectiveness of the controls over the Horizon electronic cash account and the integrity of the data held on the Horizon and CBDB systems. In accordance with the terms of reference, the review covered all transactions undertaken by Great Moor Post Office for cash account week 35 in the 2003 to 2004 year. Do you recall this work being done or being aware of it?
No.
Based on that paragraph and a quick skim of the report, it appears that the analysis was done by reference only to one post office branch. Is that right?
So it appears, yes.
There is an equivalent report for March 2005. There's no need to turn that up, but the reference for the transcript is POL 001 78583. And I think you've been provided a copy of that quite recently as well. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And would you agree that likewise in that report, the analysis seems to be done by reference to one post office branch?
Yes.
Do you recall having any awareness of any kind of monitoring work like this being done in relation to the accounts?
I was aware that the auditors were undertaking this work. At the time, I wasn't aware of the scale of it, I have to say. I should have been, but I wasn't. Being
aware of the scale of it now, do you consider it was a satisfactory way for the board to satisfy of the accuracy of the company accounts?
It was very limited.
That can come down, thank you. Just finally, at paragraphs 23 and 37, perhaps if we can start with paragraph 23 of your second statement. That's page 7. You say, I do not recall the poll board having oversight of criminal prosecutions. This was dealt with by the security and legal departments who were part of group. In hindsight, this seems to be a significant oversight by the board. And then paragraph 37, please. You say Pol's corporate structure seemed to me to be adequate at the time. However, in retrospect, I have concerns about the degree of autonomy enjoyed by security and legal and the lack of poll oversight. What do you consider was the cause or the omission or lack in the governance structure that led to this lack of oversight?
Well, subsequently, Post Office Limited has its own legal department, its own security department, as I understand it. And I think there was, during the years we are talking about, some reorganisation and then very fast reorganisation after that. And I think there were some organisation issues that led to problems. And I think the group control of legal and parts of security meant that Post Office Limited didn't have sufficient oversight of matters that should have been within its remit.
You may be aware that Alan Cook, who gave evidence to the inquiry last week, his position was that he did not appreciate that Post Office were conducting private prosecutions of SPMs until 2009. What do you make of that?
I'm surprised he wasn't told.
you were the temporary MD for 2 to 3 months before he took up the role, and you handed over to him when he arrived. Do you think you bore any responsibility for drawing that to his attention or not?
Probably.
So those are my questions. It is now 1 o'clock. I'm not sure whether core participants have questions or not. I think there are at least 2, possibly 3 sets of core participants who have some questions. Is now a convenient time to break for lunch?
Yes, it is. I think not least because the transcriber should have a break. So we'll break until 2 o'clock.
Thank you, sir.